well, welcome back everyone for another week of Joint School Live. Now, of course, COVID-19 has affected all aspects of our lives, including orthopedic surgery. And we're seeing a big change in the day-to-day practice around orthopedic surgery, how we prepare patients, how people are followed up after surgery, with a real rapid move towards more remote care and telemedicine. And so we are joined today by Dr. Mike Greiwe, who perhaps is the best placed person in the world to help us dig into what this might mean, particularly in the context of orthopedic surgery. And for those out there who are getting ready for an orthopedic operation, or even those who are in the early stages of recovery, and maybe you might have a first telemedicine consultation coming up. Because Dr. Mike is not only an orthopedic surgeon, he is also the founder of OrthoLive, a orthopedic-specific telemedicine platform. So, Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely, Axel. It's great to be here. I'm happy to join you and your patients here and everyone out there to learn a little bit about telemedicine.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, before we kick in, I mean, I often find people do a way better job of introducing themselves than I ever do. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of who you are and what you're up to?
Sure. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. Been an orthopedic surgeon for about 10 years. And 5 years ago, I founded OrthoLive. It was really out of a need to kind of like help take care of my patients better. So I have a lot of patients that come from a long way away to see me for shoulder surgery. And I felt like it was really, it was hard for them to travel like 3 or 4 hours from like the rural areas in the United States to come to Cincinnati where I practice. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking for a way to help make their travel a little bit easier and to make the whole experience of seeing me better. So I ultimately decided that telemedicine kind of was the way to go. And I looked into platforms that I could use. And back in 2016 were kind of the early days of telemedicine. We really didn't have anything that helped, physicians and patients like work together in an efficient way. And I wanted to do something better. And so that's when I founded OrthoLive and really put all my energy to make it a seamless platform for patients and providers. So that's kind of how I ended up, getting into the whole telemedicine bit.
Yeah, all right, interesting. Yeah, well, and good for you. Well done, because I've seen how it's really really picking up over the past few months with, I guess, largely with the impact of COVID-19 and the new circumstances that we're in.
Yeah, it absolutely was growing up until COVID, and then it really like shot through the roof during the COVID time period because people just needed it so much to keep their practices running and keep the lights on and to be able to continue to see their patients. So we had really done well, I think, up until like 2020, and then things just took on a whole new kind of energy beyond, probably February. Once February hit, we grew by 10 times in about 3 weeks, and then we've just been kind of continuing to grow since then. So it's been quite a wild ride since February of 2020.
Yeah, no, I bet. And of course, like for the people out there and who are watching this and who come across this, there'll be quite a few different platforms used for telemedicine consultation.
Right, absolutely.
And what's different about OrthoLive and what you guys do?
Well, we actually provide like live support for patients. So one thing that I think we go above and beyond trying to help people make sure that they get connected. That was one thing that was really important to me because no matter how tech savvy or tech unsavvy you are, you need sometimes some technical expertise. And so we decided to devote, several of the nicest people you could possibly imagine to try to help out our patients. And that was one of the biggest differentiators we have. And I think that probably is the primary major differentiator, because everybody has a video platform. It works well, you can get connected, but first of all, like how easily can you get connected? And then are you going to get some support on the other end as well? And so we had that support, which I think is really critical. And we also have insight into who's struggling with getting, on the platform before their appointment, so we can actually reach out proactively. So that's helpful too.
Yeah, I think that's really important. We find that with with the My Recovery app and with the JointSchool app as well, that it's so important to maintain a human touch even with new technology. And that those two need not be contradictory by any means.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think technology is great, but one of the most important things is human interaction and being able to have somebody to talk to when you either can figure something out or maybe you can't. But it's just good to have someone there to be able to talk through the issues.
Mhm. And for those who aren't as familiar certainly as you are with telemedicine, and perhaps if for patients out there who might have been expecting to see their surgeon or other members of the clinical team in person and now instead might be booked in for a video consultation, what are the limits of that kind of appointment as opposed to the sort of face-to-face interaction?
Well, I always say that, telemedicine is not here to replace the face-to-face interactions that you have with your physician, especially in orthopedics. I mean, we have a very hands-on profession,
Yeah.
but it's not uncommon for there to be certain routine follow-ups that we all have. Maybe it's a recheck on labs or an MRI or imaging. Your doctor wants to go through those with you, but you don't necessarily have to be sitting right there in the exam room for you to be able to go through that with them. So those are really some of the simplest ways to go through things. And then one of the other like really hallmark features of telemedicine inside the orthopedic space is sort of the post-operative visit, where a lot of times the surgeon needs to check on the incision, make sure that everything is looking okay. As long as it looks good, then they start with their recovery and get the physical therapy and things going that way. So I think there are some key visits really that occur via telemedicine now inside of orthopedics that people probably were used to coming and doing in person, but it's very, very routine and normal for us to do them via telemedicine now.
Mm-hmm. All right, interesting. Yeah, no, there's some very valid points there, and but for those who haven't had the experiences yet, what would be your, shall we say, top tips for someone who's getting ready for as a patient for their first telemedicine video consultation?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think the key for you is number one, try to sign in early. Like always, like practicing is always kind of the most important thing, right? So, but I always tell my doctors the same thing. I say, if you're going to do your first telemedicine appointment, you probably should practice just getting on the platform, making sure that everything's smooth, your video is working, your audio is working, and all the platforms. You can check your video, you can check your audio, make sure everything's good. Number two tip I think would be to make sure you're in a good Wi-Fi area so that your Wi-Fi is good, or at least you have good cell service. That's really critical for most of the platforms. And then just being there maybe a few minutes early to be ready. Then you might have to answer some questions as you get started. So it's probably good to sign in about 5 minutes early. So I think those are the key things. Some systems, a couple of additional things. Some systems have you use specific browsers. So like, Google Chrome is kind of the one of the main browsers that's supported by telemedicine systems out there. So if you're using your computer, make sure that you know which browser to use. And then if it's an app, you make sure that you have your app downloaded and you're ready to go. So those are kind of my quick and dirty tips for like getting on a telemedicine platform.
Yeah, good stuff. And I guess really those tips would also work for any surgeons and doctors and other clinicians out there who may be getting ready for their first video consultation.
Right. So for the surgeons out there, I always kind of make the analogy, like if you're going to do your first ever, surgery on whatever, you would have, practiced and studied up and done your thing and made sure. It's the same type of thing with telemedicine. You just, check, make sure your video is working, that you can sign in and all those things. So it's just very, very simple stuff, but just make sure you can sign in and that your video and audio is working and all of that. And then it's really quick. It's very easy most of the time, but if you haven't done it, then when the crux of the moment occurs and you might not be ready. I had a lot of panicked phone calls, and it was a simple thing where like, oh well, your video need to be turned on, or something really simple like that.
Yeah. And I guess also with when we're talking about new technology, another concern that people may often have is around sort of privacy and security. What would you say to reassure those who may be wondering or be a little bit worried about that aspect?
Yeah, I think it's so important, the privacy and security for patients. We take it very seriously, and really all the telemedicine programs out there are very secure. They're what we call HIPAA compliant in the United States, which takes privacy to another level. You also in the UK, I know, have some significant privacy laws as well. For us, it's just really important that data is secured, and it's secured from the one side where you receive that data. And then through the internet, it's also secured. And then at the end, it is also secured. And so for us at OrthoLive and Spring Health Live, we have 256-bit encryption. And so it really maximizes the way that the data is secured in transit, and also the way it's secured at its sort of original location and then its sort of final destination. But all telemedicine programs are supposed to be compliant from a data privacy standpoint. One of the things that we have to remember is that FaceTime and other like Skype and things like that, they're not secure. And so in the US, the physicians were allowed to use those things for a period of time, but that will quickly go away as we kind of get more into this crisis. I think that will go away first. So it's very important to make sure that the physicians are on sort of a secure platform.
Yeah, no, that was going to be my next question, really, about what is the difference between a dedicated platform such as yours and all these other day-to-day forms of communication and video communication that people may use. But yes,
yeah, it's all around the security and how the data is sort of secured. It's like under lock and key, when it's using these other platforms that are telemedicine specific platforms. Yeah. But if it's just sort of a hosted meeting with like a FaceTime or Skype, it's not secure. And so anyone might be able to see that information. That's why it's so important to make sure that you're on a true, telemedicine platform as you're discussing your health and those types of things.
Yeah. No, indeed. And so for we're sort of here, we're kind of laying the foundations of an understanding around telemedicine and orthopedics. But what's your vision for the next steps, or indeed your ideal vision for the future, for how post-operative follow-ups might work and so on?
Well, I think, there are certain surgeries that do very, very well with telemedicine. So, and there's certain follow-up time periods that are really good for telemedicine, others that aren't. That first week in follow-up is usually a really good time to use telemedicine for a couple of reasons. Number one, the surgeon really is caring a lot about the incision. Mm-hmm. And so being able to visualize the incision is very readily apparent using telemedicine. So that's a great time period for us to use it. Many times, though, we do surgeries that require X-ray follow-up. And so that follow-up may need to be at 4 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks. And so, having an X-ray sort of throws a little bit of a wrench into telemedicine follow-ups. But there's so many arthroscopic surgeries that are out there too. And so those arthroscopic surgeries can be followed up very easily using telemedicine. But if you're looking at like a total hip or total knee, you might do that first visit via telemedicine. You come back 6 weeks later, you take an X-ray, and that doctor will either, have an in-person visit with you or may follow up on the X-ray with you via telemedicine. And then 3 months, you might also do another telemedicine follow-up to just check your range of motion and those types of things. So it's really up to the doctor how often they like to use telemedicine. But I think most people are finding that first visit post-operative is like a good time to do and use telemedicine.
Okay, well, great. Well, I think that's a fantastic overview of telemedicine in orthopedics, and it'll be exciting to see where it takes us next. Is there anything else you'd want to add before we round this call off?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Axel. I mean, I think just looking at the future, like you're mentioning, it is apparent that telemedicine is sort of here to stay. It's just really nice for patients. I think it's very convenient for them. And it also it's good for the surgeons as well. I think we're much more able to stay sort of on time using telemedicine, because we have sort of this regularly scheduled time period, and you can kind of check in. So I think it's good for both parties. I think it'll be here to stay. We're finding a lot of patient happiness with telemedicine. People really like using it, and so I think it'll be a part of our healthcare landscape in the future. It's just really up to the surgeons how they want to use it, how they want to see it used in their clinic. But I think you'll see, if you're a patient, a lot more use of telemedicine in the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also linking in with the sort of the aspects that we're working on with the My Recovery app and the Joint School app, in terms of how you can kind of create a platform where people can track their own progress, and a surgeon can check in on that and then use that to then communicate and check in around different things that may arise, that may pop up, and you kind of get a feel for what a patient's goals might be, how they're progressing towards them, and where they're up to at that point in time, just as they show up for that video consultation.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, the way that we are able to kind of tell a surgeon when something is going either well or maybe not going well, that sort of immediacy of like knowing, oh, this patient may not be doing as well as we like. Let's go ahead and check in now and not wait for 4 weeks until our next appointment.
Yeah.
And then we find out, oh, someone just hasn't progressed as well as we wanted them to. But that knowledge is really key. And it sounds like that's what you're working on, which is great stuff.
Yeah, well, fantastic. Hey, well, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, thank you everyone out there checking in on this on this particular episode, which has been sort of highlighted by quite a few people who've sort of sent in saying, well, my appointment's been changed to telemedicine or video consultation. What's that going to mean? So, as ever, if there's something that you're worrying about out there or that you're concerned about, send it in. We'll get to it. We'll find someone who's an expert on the topic, and we'll really dig into the different issues and kind of help to build an understanding about how orthopedics surgery is going to proceed in these new circumstances. So thanks very much, everyone. Of course, subscribe. You'll find more information about OrthoLive in the links below this video. And to everyone out there, be good, keep up the good work, and we'll see you next time. And thanks, Dr. Greiwe.
No problem. Thanks a lot, Axel. You guys have a good one.
Yeah, you too.